Today we're going to talk about something that I know affects a lot of parents of autistic kids. And this is when your kids' triggers are everywhere in the world where you guys go. I had a parent that recently left a comment in one of my videos and talked about the fact that her child was triggered by big books, which meant that it was almost impossible to take her child anywhere where there were going to be big books, like at a coffee shop where somebody is reading, or at the library, or even at the park when somebody's sitting on the bench and reading a book. If this fear of taking your child out because you're going to run into their triggers is something that resonates with you, stick around for this video. My name is Carrie Sousa Woodward, and I'm a Board Certified Behavior Analyst that's been working with autistic children for 23 years now. Books may not be your child's trigger, but maybe it's lights or sounds or certain people. In this video, we're going to walk you through the steps of a compassionate way to approach this problem. I'm going to give you research-backed strategies to help your child learn to cope, not just avoid these triggers to be successful. It's completely understandable to want to shield your child from the things that set them off. But when triggers are out in public places, like church or grocery stores, waiting rooms, or parks, we can't just avoid them forever. And here's what often happens. You start skipping outings. You avoid that store. You leave early. You choose drive-through instead of going out. Bit by bit, your world gets smaller, and your child misses opportunities to learn and grow in the real world. But there is a better way. Dr. Greg Hanley's research, specifically his research in the strategy called My Way, gives us a sort of a framework on how to approach compassionately introducing our children to these triggers and gradually building how well they can cope in the presence of these triggers without having major problem behaviors. Not only that, but we're building communication for your child to be able to tell you what they want or need, whether or not you can give it to them in that moment every single time. So step one of this plan is to identify the triggers. Now, if you're a parent who's had a very hard time identifying triggers, this one is going to be tricky for you. If you don't know your child's triggers, you need to spend some time trying to document every time that your child has one of these behavioral outbursts. Whatever the problem behavior is that's evoked from seemingly nowhere has a trigger, you just haven't identified it yet. And so spend some time jotting down every time that this behavior happens. Put what happened right before that behavior. Put what happened right after that behavior, and see if you can find a sort of a pattern. Is it always a similar sound? Is it music playing? Is it the presence of a certain person? Were you out and there were smells in the world that perhaps were triggering to your child? For a lot of parents, they already know the trigger right off the bat. The second step to this approach is to create teaching moments in a very controlled environment like your home. You don't want to just take your child out and expose them to these triggers without having any control over what happens to that trigger when your child has a problem behavior. What we're going to try to do is create opportunities for your child to not even get pushed to that problem behavior. So let's just take big books, for example. We're going to use the example that the parent left the comment about. So I'm going to identify a handful of big books that I'm going to use in my house in order to create teaching moments for my child. Every single time that I set up an opportunity, that's one opportunity to rehearse these new skills of communicating and coping. The first thing we need to do is to start building this communication skill for our child. Most likely, they do not have a way to ask for the thing that they need in that moment. So if big books are the trigger, and let's say that closing the book is what the child is after. So when she sees a person out in the community who's reading a big book, she runs over and shuts the book. If you're just sitting out at a park reading a book and some strange child runs over and closes your book, you're going to be pretty alarmed, right? Like, this is the scenario that a parent is trying to avoid by probably not taking their child out into places where they're likely to see their trigger. So in the house where I have control, I'm going to open the big book and I'm going to immediately prompt the child to request the desired outcome, which is close the book, close it, close. If they don't have vocal language, I'm going to give them a sign. If they have a picture exchange system or an AAC device, I'm going to show them how to communicate on that device, close. And I'm going to reinforce it every single time. We can practice this 10 times a day. I will find a book, I will open it, I will immediately prompt them to use the communication close, and I will close the book, pull it away, and move on. You can reinforce with other reinforcers as well, like maybe a favorite treat or a favorite toy. But you don't need to, because the ultimate reinforcer is essentially seeing that book be closed. The reason that the strategy from Dr. Hanley is called My Way is because in a lot of the work that he does, he just teaches children to communicate my way. And essentially they get the whatever it is that they want. They don't have to be specific. It works very well, especially when there are multiple triggers and there are a variety of different desired outcomes that children have with those triggers, that essentially giving this one sort of catch-all request, my way, allows them to just learn one thing to ask to pretty much get their desired outcome for all of these triggers. If your child's trigger is very specific and there's one desired outcome, then you can teach them that more specific request. Okay, so at this point, you're probably wondering, how in the heck does this help us actually get out into the community? Because all I'm doing is teaching her that she can ask for the thing she wants and she gets it right away. That's not going to work in the real world, right? So once we have solid communication that's happening very consistently every time the trigger is presented to your child, then we start to work on gradually building in some coping. And this just means that we are going to sort of hesitate before we reinforce by closing the book. So we open the book, the child says, close it, and I'm going to say, okay. And I'm going to close the book. And like this very, very brief period where I don't immediately close it is most likely uncomfortable. And this is that discomfort that kids need to sort of be able to sit with and learn how to cope with that feeling. And we're not going to just shove them through a long period of coping. We're going to just do it for a couple of seconds. And we're going to continue in this way. Maybe we start to alternate where every other time we do it immediately, we close the book. And then the other time we hesitate a little bit or we pause before we do it, and we give them just a couple of seconds to sit with this discomfort before we close the book. The next step is to begin to sort of increase this delay, this hesitation, and you can do it in ways that still appear very functional. For example, you open the book, and when your child requests close it, you can say, just 1 second. Okay, now I close the book. So count in your head. Maybe it's 3 seconds, maybe it's 4 seconds. And every time you do it, you're just giving it a little bit longer of a period so that your child is learning to sit with discomfort. Now, if at any point your child engages in the problematic behavior that you've been hoping to avoid, that means you've pushed it too far and you want to start coming back. Remember to always sort of intersperse immediately giving access to the reinforcer or closing the book so that it's not a delay every single time. You can even start to incorporate some prompts for your child as you get to longer periods of delay. You could say like, I need it for 30 seconds. Can you wait for 30 seconds? Now you have to have gradually built up to that 30 seconds. However, when you get there, you can start using a visual timer. The next step is actually introducing that word no, that thing that you're going to use to basically deny their request. And again, you're not going to deny it outright at the very beginning. You need to sort of build up the tolerance to hearing no or having this request denied. So when you open the book and the child says, close it, you're going to say no. And then if they are able to hear that word and not immediately react, you're going to reinforce and close the book and say, I love how you were able to be okay hearing no. I love how you tolerated that. Whatever your description of what they did well is going to be specific with it. Describe the thing that they did and how much you enjoyed it. Even if your child may not necessarily understand that language, you're still basically describing the desired response that you're hoping to see in the future. You were calm. Great job, and close the book. And then the final step is starting to increase the period where they're having to be totally denied the reinforcer. And so you say no, and you gradually build up the time that they can sit with feeling okay with the book being open right there in front of them. This might look like the first time you do it, you reinforce immediately. The second time you do it, you hesitate and pause and provide a little delay. The third time you do it, you say no, and you build up however long they're able to be okay hearing no before you close it. And then maybe you go right back to reinforcing it immediately. This type of the lack of predictability is actually creating a stronger behavior for your child. If you do it the exact same way every single time, the first time that you change or it varies from what they're expecting, they might have a problem. But if you've always been changing it up and just changing the way that you deliver it, sometimes it's an outright denial, sometimes it's just a hesitation and delay, and sometimes you reinforce immediately, this is what creates the strongest behavior for our kids. And you know your child better than anybody else, and so you are going to have to make the determination of what this looks like for them. You're going to have to know when to increase the time, when to stretch the child's skill just a little bit further from where they were yesterday. If you're working with a board certified behavior analyst, you may have them design you a very tailored program. And this is based on looking at the data of your child's performance every single day and making adjustments on a daily basis to support where they are and where they need to be. If you're on your own, you can still do this. It might just take a little bit more effort on your part. And the last thing that we do when we're working on this type of improved tolerance to triggers is to eventually take it back out into the real world, because your child is going to be forced to engage with their triggers outside of the comfort of your home. So I like to do this by actually bringing the triggers that we worked with in the home setting out into the community. So there's still some carryover from where we worked and practiced these skills out into a different environment. So maybe we go to a park where we're not going to expect to see a lot of other people, but I can still bring my book, sit down at the table, open the book, and practice working on saying, not right now, and practicing that tolerance out in the community. The final step would be being able to go and have this skill be generalized where your child sees the trigger with some stranger and is able to be okay hearing you say, they're not going to close their book right now. No, we're going to just move on, and have your child be able to cope with that feeling of discomfort and move on. Now, when you move out into the community, it's really important to have other reinforcers that you can use to give your child when they have been successful with the response we're looking for. So when they are able to successfully tolerate that discomfort of being told no, or the hesitation of not getting what they want right away, you want to still reinforce that behavior with some other reinforcer, whether that's a snack that you have with you or a treat, or maybe one of their favorite toys that you can pull out of your pocket and give to them. Anytime you are outrightly denying their request, you have to reinforce them with something else, because even though they haven't engaged in the problem behavior, what they have done is engaged in a bunch of other alternative behaviors. And those alternative behaviors are awesome. They're the opposite of the problem behavior. And so we want to strengthen the alternate behaviors. And how we do that is we have to provide some sort of reinforcer, whether that's edible reinforcer, something that they can eat, or it's a tangible reinforcer, something that they can play with. If they're sensitive to social reinforcers like praise, good job, wow, that was amazing, patting on the back, high fives, use those. But if they're not sensitive to those, if those aren't enough to strengthen their behavior, then you need something much more powerful. I hope the news that you take away from this video is that you don't need to avoid the world forever. If you found yourself sort of holing up into your home, or starting to not take your child out to places because you're worried about what behaviors are going to happen and you can't manage them, this is the perfect way to gradually approach building your child's tolerance to some of these triggering stimuli that they encounter in their daily life. We want to give our kids tools to be resilient, to be successful out into the world. And you can do this by working on a step-by-step process, gradually exposing them to these things that trigger difficult behaviors for them, giving them the communication tools to be able to ask for the things that they want and need, and then working to build how to be okay hearing no and not getting that desired outcome. If this video is helpful for you, I'm so glad. Make sure to subscribe so that you're around for the next video, and send the video to another parent that you know is struggling to take their child out into the world because of what's going to happen.